Before starting this video, I do want to give a shout out to my patrons that support the channel. And if you'd like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you if you want to look at the Patreon link down below. So with that out of the way, let's get into this week's video. What's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG. Glad to have you here. Today we're going to be looking at Tekuthal and Mono-Blue Dominus. So it's a 4 mana cost and it's a legendary creature, Phyrexian horror. Pretty cool, so it could be your commander and has flying, and if you would proliferate twice instead. That's pretty powerful if you're in a specific niche deck with counters, planeswalkers, or etc., other different kinds of things. Also, like the other Dominus creatures, it provides a way so that it could have an indestructible counter on itself. But what's really funny is actually it could proliferate itself if you wanted to. So if you want to put more indestructible counters on it, that's pretty great by itself with this commander. So obviously this is going to be more mono-blue colors because this is a mono-blue commander. We're going to focus on some of the strategies you may want to follow when considering this commander. I think it'd be pretty powerful and especially stupidly nuts in a lot of different combinations with counters. But let's first talk about proliferate because our commander actually does not proliferate itself, so we need to have proliferate enablers to have in this deck so that we can make sure we can double our proliferate abilities. So let's talk about some great proliferators like Thrumming Bird. It's a classic, it has flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you proliferate. Pretty simple and pretty easy. We want to proliferate twice off of this, so this is great. Flux Channeler is going to be absolutely insane in here because we're going to be casting a whole lot of non-creature spells, so we're going to be proliferating when we do that. But even a better option with Inexorable Tide, whenever you cast a spell in general, not just non-creature spells, like Flux Channeler, we're going to be proliferating. I also did want to mention a new card with Experimental Augury, essentially being a brainstorm, looking at the top 3 cards of your library, putting one of them in your hand, and the rest of the bottom of your library in any order. So kind of a brainstorm, kind of not, but you get a proliferate off the top of that. So that's a really great ability right there, just for some card value. There's a lot of other ways to proliferate in this deck. I put most of the cards down below in the description in a deck list if you want to go check that out. So there are some interesting ways to put counters on different permanents that we do have, like Ominous Seas. Whenever you draw a card, you put a Force Shadow counter on Ominous Seas, but with proliferating, we're going to be proliferating twice, so this is going to be very easy to catch up to those 8 Force Shadow counters, so that we can make an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. So this is pretty great, but if you don't need it, you can cycle away anyway with this card. So I like this card a lot in this deck. Just for 2 mana, you're going to get a lot of value, and you're going to be making a lot of 8/8 blue Kraken tokens. Also, another great card to add in this list would be As Foretold. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. So again, we're going to be proliferating a lot, so we're going to be putting a lot of time counters on here. And once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell that you cast with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. We're going to be putting so much counters on this, it's essentially going to be free spell every single turn if you'd like. Another simple card to produce a lot of mana in this deck would be Everflowing Chalice. This is really great in here because it enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it for each time it was kicked, and you could add a colorless mana for each charge counter on Everflowing Chalice. The only thing we need to do is kick this once and we have 1 counter on it, then we're going to be proliferating like crazy, and then we're going to get a lot of counters on it so that we can tap for a lot of mana. So this is a great card to add into this deck for sure. I don't want to spend too much time here because there's going to be a lot of different things you can put counters on to make them busted. However, I do want to talk about Planeswalkers because this is a Super Friends deck. I did want to talk about a card that's absolutely busted for Planeswalkers if you want to add it to this deck. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. We have Ichor-Moon Gauntlet. This is absolutely perfect. All your Planeswalkers you control have +0 proliferate and also -12 take an extra turn after this one. Doesn't matter what kind of Planeswalker you have, they're going to have those abilities stapled onto them. Also, it does have whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent, put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. So that's pretty great too. Just a one-time proliferate only on one Planeswalker specifically, or another artifact or enchantment or whatever kind of permanent you do have. This could get out of hand really quickly, and your opponents might get annoyed of how much extra turns you might get, depending on how much Planeswalkers you do have on the field. I know there's a lot of hype around this card. What do you think of this new card? Do you feel like it's overhyped? Do you feel like it's the new bootlegger stash where it was super hyped but then crashed down at a really cheap price? Let me know down below in the comments. So before we get into the Planeswalkers we want to add into this list, let's talk about some Planeswalker essentials. In a Super Friends deck, we do have Oath of Jace. I feel like this is a great utility enchantment for your Planeswalker decks because you're going to be drawing 3 cards. I mean, you're going to be discarding cards, but that's not a big deal because you're going to get some card advantage out of it, replacing itself essentially. And at the beginning of your upkeep, scry X, where X is the number of Planeswalkers you control. Of course, the more Planeswalkers you do have, the more you could dig deeper into your library so that you could search for a great card to put on top of there. I did also want to mention Deep Glow Skate. This is a great card in here because you could double the number of each kind of counters on any number of target permanents. So obviously your Planeswalkers, some of your artifact enchantments or creatures that do have counters on them, this doubles them. So this is just a great card in any kind of Super Friends deck. And I did also want to mention Spark Double. This is absolutely great in here because you could either copy your commander and then you could proliferate, making your commander bigger each time you proliferate. Or you could easily copy one of your Planeswalkers, get an additional loyalty counter on it, and then go to town with the amount of Planeswalkers you do have on the battlefield. So let's go over some Planeswalkers, not all the Planeswalkers. There's over like, I think 20 in this deck list, but I'm going to go over some of my favorites that could possibly win the game for you. The first Planeswalker to make an appearance on this list would be Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. This version of Teferi has a great ability of whenever you draw a card, you could put a loyalty counter on this specific Teferi, and because its zeroed ability is a drawing card, that's really great by itself. And also it makes a blocker with a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, you can put a 1/1 counter on it. Since we're putting 1/1 counters on those spirits, we could easily proliferate and then proliferate again to make those spirits absolutely huge. Plus, it does have a great -12 ability. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and return it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into those owner's library. So honestly, a crazy Cyclonic Rift kind of ability. Not really Cyclonic Rift, but honestly pretty devastating for one opponent. Let's also throw in another Teferi with Teferi Master of Time. This is absolutely crazy, being able to activate loyalty abilities essentially at instant speed. You could draw a card, then discard a card, and also target creature you don't control phases out, so that's some protection right there. And also it's -10, take 2 extra turns after this 1 turn. So this is just absolutely crazy right here. We're going to be able to ultimate this Planeswalker really easily, and then we can keep on doing that, making that loop. If we have Ichor Gauntlet on the battlefield as well, and we have a lot of Planeswalkers. So a pretty crazy card right there, but let's go over Tamiyo the Moon Sage. This is a classic card that's pretty great. I like it mainly for that emblem. You get an emblem with, you have no maximum hand size, and whenever a card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you may return it to your hand. So this is just a great ability overall. The goal of the deck is essentially trying to ultimate your Planeswalkers as much as you can so you can accumulate so much value that it overwhelms your opponents. However, I do want to mention my favorite Planeswalker on this list. If we're to ultimate a Planeswalker, we do have Tezzeret Artifice Master. This has a great ultimate ability. You get an emblem at the beginning of your end step. Search your library for a permanent card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So a permanent card, whether it's an artifact, enchantment, creature, or another Planeswalker. If you want to keep on searching for those, you can, so that we can accumulate so much value. I definitely think this is a great fit in this deck, mainly because it also protects itself by making a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So this is just a great overall in my opinion. So that'll be it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on this pretty new Mono Blue Commander. This is definitely a great 99 card instead of a Commander itself because it is restricted by Mono Blue. Oh man, this is going to be absolutely nuts. And Atraxa, instead of proliferating once at the year end step, you're going to be proliferating twice. That's going to be insane with this. However, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this commander. Let me know down below in the comments. How does this stack up to the rest of the Dominus cycle? I personally like the red one the most because red is my favorite color, and when you're dealing double the damage, I'm all in. So make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That's definitely the best way to support the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.